If I were to ask you how many movies made you cry during your entire life, would you be able to name every one of those movies? And if you can, why is Up one of them? I think Up is one of those movies that everyone cried at least once while watching it. And in today's episode of ranking every Pixar movie ever made, we'll review this movie. If you are new to this channel, hi, welcome. And if you want to support this small channel of mine, please consider subscribing to it. And now, enough yapping said, let's talk about Up. And don't forget that this entire video is subjective and that you have the right to have your own opinion. And so the movie starts with a documentary about an explorer named Charles Muntz that talks about Paradise Falls, a lost world in South America. And we get introduced to the main character of the movie named Carl, who's that kid watching the documentary with a facial expression similar to the one that I had when watching Transformers for the first time. While walking back home, Carl meets a young girl named Ellie in an abandoned house, which is a really safe place to play as a kid. Let's just hope that they don't find some kind of needle. Ellie acts like some kind of explorer, just like Charles Muntz, which is something that both of these characters have in common, even though she scares Carl a little. And so after Carl broke his arm, Ellie went to his house to visit him, which made him jump abnormally. And she showed him her adventure book. We then watch a sequence of moments where Carl and Ellie grow up and have a life together, which is really emotional because they go through so much stuff together, like infertility and Ellie's death, which is even sadder, knowing that she wasn't able to complete her dream goal. And so one morning, Carl wakes up and stretches, which makes him crack abnormally. And he starts cleaning up the place. We then learn that Carl lives in a construction site, and I cannot even imagine how bad his sleep must be. Then a kid named Russell knocks at his door and asks if he can help him, but Carl decides to prank him by making him look out for a fictional animal around his house. And so after hurting a construction worker with his cane, Carl gets sent to a retirement home, but he instead decides to prank the workers and flies away with his house towards Paradise Falls, which is the place that he and Ellie dreamed to go together. And so while he was relaxing in the sky, someone knocks at his door, which ruins the calm, and we find out that it's Russell. Carl decides to prank him once again.
Please let me in.
No. Are you serious, my brother?
He then tries to send Russell away by making him land on a building, but Carl accidentally drops him, which causes his sudden death, and the movie ends. Just kidding. It was all in his imagination. Carl and Russell then flies into a storm and Carl loses consciousness. When waking up, hoping that he was dead, Russell confirms that they're officially in South America by checking his GPS. A GPS that he ends up dropping accidentally while trying to land the house. Nothing goes as planned, and the house decides to go away without them, but they're able to take it back. And they realize at the same time that they're officially in Paradise Falls. And so they start walking towards the fall with the house attached to their back. And on their way there, they meet whatever this shit is called, which is a flexible creature that likes chocolate. And they keep moving on. And they also find a talking dog, which is like the least menacing dog ever. In the meantime, we meet a group of talking dogs, with one of them having a funny voice.
Perhaps you desired squirrel.
And they find out where the bird is and starts going after it. And later, after failing to send off the animals, Carl and the rest of the gang take a break. But my question here is, aren't they hungry? Cause I haven't seen them eat something since they landed. And so they all go to sleep, and that bird sleeps in one hell of a position. The next morning, they find out that Kevin, which is the name of the bird, is a female, and the evil dogs kidnap the characters to take them to their master. Turns out their master is the one, the only Charles Muntz, and he's somehow still alive. I'm sure he found the secret way to immortality. I can't believe he's still alive otherwise. Then he invites them to his place, and Carl transforms himself into a fanboy. But because they had a misunderstanding concerning the bird, Charles sends his dogs to their pursuit, and our main characters get helped by Kevin and Dog. But sadly, Dog has no charisma.
Stop, you dogs!
though they were able to escape the dogs by playing a game of Fall Guys with them. And so when trying to bring back Kevin to its place, because it has a broken leg, they get found by Charles once again, because Doug had his location activated, and Charles captures Kevin. And so Carl has two choices, a bit like Batman had in The Dark Knight. Either he frees Kevin, or either he saves his house. And sadly, Carl takes the wrong choice and saves his house. And so Charles ends up kidnapping Kevin. Then Carl ends up going to the fall like he was supposed to go, but Russell is mad at him because he didn't free Kevin like he wanted. And so inside the house, Carl sits down and starts reading Ellie's adventure book, which is a really emotional and meaningful scene. And while reading it, he changes his mind about what he did. So he empties his house, leaving all of these souvenirs of Ellie behind, and goes to help Russell to save Kevin. And on his way there, he finally adopts Doug. Russell then infiltrates Charles's dirigible, and he interrupts the dogs' poker game. Carl then suddenly transforms himself into Tarzan and saves Russell, and he's able to send the dogs away and free Kevin because of a ball.
Who wants the ball? I go get it!
The movie then becomes a parody of Star Wars with pilot dogs and a duel of Carl versus Charles. And somehow these two old men are able to do these hardcore stunts even at their age, which are stunts that I can't even do. In the meantime, Doug is able to imprison the leader of the dogs and becomes the alpha.
Yes, Alpha!
Then we get one last standoff between Charles and the good guys, and Charles loses because of chocolate. The house then flies away, which makes Carl say his last goodbyes to it. Carl and Russell then finally visit Kevin's family and say their last goodbye to it too. And for some reason, Carl decides that he doesn't need a cane anymore because he's too strong for that. Carl then assists Russell's badge presentation ceremony, and he gives him the badge that Ellie gave him a long time ago, and the movie ends. And so that was a summary of the movie. Now what did I think of it? Well, as soon as you jump into the movie, you already get so emotional because of the 10-minute introductions with Carl and Ellie developing a life. I think it's one of the most memorable introduction scenes of all times, and one of the most emotional ones too. And I think it's also a great establishing for the movie because it shows us what Carl's goals are. And talking about him and Ellie, let's talk a bit about their couple. The contrast between these two personalities inside their relationship is very interesting and cute. On the one hand, you have Carl, who is a shy guy, and on the other hand, you have Ellie, who's an energetic and adventurous lady. And I find this contrast between these two people very entertaining. And I even think that this contrast comes back in Carl and Russell's relationship, because on the one hand, you have Carl, a grumpy old man, and on the other hand, you have Russell, another energetic kid. So I find this contrast in these two relationships very entertaining. Also, I find the concept of this movie very unique and memorable. I don't think I've ever watched another movie who does exactly the same thing as this movie does, with that house floating in the sky with balloons attached to it. And even though this concept is a bit unrealistic, well, who cares? It's a fucking kids movie. Also, talking again about Carl and Russell's relationship, I think this relationship was fun to watch. They started off on the wrong foot, and during their adventure, they went through a lot of shit together. And so they started to become attached to each other. And when Carl finally landed his house, he took his wife's adventure book and started to read it. And he discovered that inside of this book, her wife had put photos of them inside of it, making it look like an adventure. And when understanding that she was telling him to find a new adventure after her passing, well, he decided that this adventure shall be Russell. And I really find this evolution within this relationship very cute and interesting. And also, let's not forget that during the entire movie, even though Ellie is dead, she's still present somehow. The floating house is kind of symbolic because this house contains memories of Ellie, and Carl does not want to let it go because he has one goal to achieve, and that goal was the goal that both had when she was still alive. And so with him walking around everywhere with that house in his hand like it's some kind of dog, it's kind of metaphorical because You know, in comic books, right? When a character think about something, they have some kind of cloud that comes out of their head. And the way I see it, this house is kind of like Carl's version of his little cloud that comes out of his head, because he always has Ellie on his mind, and it follows him everywhere. Also, the underlying message of the movie is very emotional. The movie tries to tell us that even though we have some big dream goals we want to achieve, well, we should not necessarily abandon these small little steps that we take in life, because there are also some kind of adventure, the adventure of life. Like I said previously, Ellie had put some photos of her and Carl in her adventure book while they were growing up alive together. And even though her big adventure was supposed to go to Paradise Falls, well, she still had some kind of adventure with Carl. And I think this movie wants us to not forget that life is an adventure in itself. And I find this underlying message very cute. Also, I think that this movie mixes humor and emotions really well. It's a very emotional, humoristic movie. I found its humor really funny, and I found the overall story very emotional. And one genre of this movie did not overstep on the other. So, when there were emotional scenes going on, they didn't ruin these moments with humor, like some other movies do sometimes. And I really respect that. And do you know what I also respect in this movie? The formula that they use to share the story. They use the show don't tell formula, which means that instead of audibly say everything that they do and do some kind of narration over their action, like recent Netflix shows are doing, well, they just let the action speak for itself, which is something that I think modern movies are missing sometimes. And I'll give you an example of when it was greatly used in this movie. When Carl was looking at a picture of Ellie, the first times he said loudly what he was thinking about, because as a viewer, we needed to understand what he was thinking. But when we started to acknowledge what he was thinking when looking at those pictures, well, we didn't need him to say it loudly anymore. Just a frame of him looking at a picture told enough. And I think this formula used in this movie was really well made. I also really like the colors of this movie and how saturated they are. I'm personally a big fan of saturated colors in the art of videography, and this movie used them pretty well. And they weren't just overly saturated to be overly saturated. The colors used in this movie had a meaning. I'll give you an example. When Carl finally sat down after landing his house, the house was now looking desaturated. It has less colors than it had at the beginning of the movie. And why? Well, the way I see it, the colors inside this movie are very representative of what adventure Carl should be doing. And so, because there were no more colors inside the house when he was done with this adventure, the colors moved to the outside and on Russell, because he was his new adventure, like Ellie's book was telling him. And so that's the way I saw the colors in this movie. I don't know if you saw it differently, so if you did, please let me know in the comment section. And the soundtrack of this movie is so good. Michael Giacchino really did play with our emotions there. Just that one track, Married Life, tells you how good this soundtrack is. This track is the one that they used during the 10 minutes introduction, where Carl and Ellie were growing up alive. And that one track was very present during that introduction. It was able to make us live a roller coaster of emotions. And when I listen to this soundtrack nowadays, I get PTSDs of this movie, to be honest. And now that I have mentioned everything that I like about this movie, let's talk a bit about the couple of things that I liked less in it. There's the matter of the environments that I didn't quite like, because I found some of them very empty. And when they weren't so empty, I found them to be a bit generic and repetitive, like in the forest and in the place surrounded by stones. And the main action of this movie is less memorable than the uniqueness of its concept. The action sequences were a bit repetitive at times, and not as memorable as the main story of the movie. I think they were a bit forgettable, to be honest. And now, with all that said, where should I put it in this tier list? Well, I decided to put it in A tier, right in front of The Incredibles. Even though I really liked the action in The Incredibles, I think I like the overall story and the emotions in Up, and so that's why I put it in front of The Incredibles. What did did you guys think of Up? I want to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section down below. In the next episode of this series of videos where I rank every Pixar movie ever made, we'll go over Toy Story 3, one of my favorite movies of all time, and that is even part of my top 4 Letterboxd movies. If you don't want to miss out on this next episode, please consider subscribing to this channel and hit the bell button to get notified whenever I upload. If you enjoyed or hated this video, make sure to leave a like or dislike. I send you guys all my love and hope to see you in the next one. See y'all!